I'd like to call this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly to order. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Allard?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Presberdia?
Here.
Ms. Zolotel?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. If Deputy Chief Carroll can please come up to the microphone, turn it on, and lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Next, we have the land acknowledgement. Mr. Presberdia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For more than 1,000 years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you. Next, minutes of previous meetings. There are none. Next, we have the Mayor's report. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Assembly members and everyone listening in tonight. Over the course of the next 7 weeks, while I'm in this role, there is much work to be done. We remain focused on increasing vaccinations, transitioning out of our emergency response posture, and leading a strong economic recovery in Anchorage, including by getting federal relief dollars out the door as soon as possible. Vaccine Week was very successful, and we are getting closer and closer to our 70% vaccination goal. And as of this week, 12 to 15-year-olds will also become eligible for a COVID vaccine. Vaccines, as you know, are critical to making sure we have a safe and smooth economic recovery in Anchorage. This Monday, we received Department of Treasury guidance on the American Rescue Plan Act relief funds. We now know that we will have approximately $102 million in federal funding coming into Anchorage over the next year, with over $50 million of that expected to arrive within the next week. After receiving and reviewing the guidance, our office quickly prepared a proposal, and is actually finalizing it now, for how to spend this initial batch of funding. We are asking the Assembly to lay it on the table this evening so that we can get the funding out immediately. The proposal includes direct grants to small businesses and nonprofits that weren't funded through the CARES Act, funding for technical assistance to leverage the ARPA funding and help businesses and others access federal relief funds, including direct funding for restaurants and childcare facilities, and much more. We will be working with the Assembly over the coming week to ensure that this federal funding is effectively and efficiently put into the hands of the organizations and residents who need it most. We are leading the country in getting rent relief funding out the door. Some states haven't even opened applications yet, and we are cutting checks. We partnered with Alaska Housing Finance Corp. And Cook Inlet Housing Authority to create a streamlined process with a single application. Now, HFC has issued checks to more than 2,000 Anchorage families, which covers back rent and the next 3 months of payments for eligible applicants. I want to thank HFC and partner nonprofits such as Catholic Social Services for processing more than 30,000 applications statewide so efficiently and for getting money to landlords as quickly as possible. We also continue to step down our emergency response to COVID and prepare for the long term. This includes loosening restrictions as well as the demobilization of the Emergency Operations Center, a process that started this week. This transition includes operationalizing EOC functions to several receiving municipal departments. I'm deeply grateful to every individual who has worked at the EOC over the course of the last year to lead Anchorage through an unprecedented pandemic. Looking ahead, the election results show a tight race, and a lot of the coverage so far has focused on the stark differences between the two candidates. As I think ahead to the end of my term and the next administration, I want to share something that I've learned. Running for office and leading a city are two very different things. Politics can be divisive. It's often about highlighting differences and turning out supportive voters. Being mayor is different. It's about listening, collaborating, and making decisions with our entire community in mind. My hope is that our next mayor, whoever he is, takes office focused on how we move Anchorage forward together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Next, we have the Assembly Chair's report. Welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us for tonight's Assembly meeting, whether you're watching us online, on GCI Channel 9, or are in person. For those in person, thank you for following our COVID-19 protocols, including physical distancing and wearing a mask. Thanks again for those in person for following our rules of decorum for these chambers. Following these rules helps to create a welcoming atmosphere for all Anchorage residents to participate in their local government. For those new to our meetings, you can find these rules of decorum on signs at the back of the chamber. Later in our agenda, you'll notice a lot of conditional protests for liquor licenses. As our business license official will tell you, we are in the liquor license renewal season. So this is a normal time of year when we'll see many of these items in the 15 section of our agenda. While the word protest might sound harsh, a conditional protest is a legal term with a specific meaning. Conditional protests are typically temporary and based on specific factors, including taxes owed, approval of a special land use permit, certification from the health department, the fire department, land use enforcement, or the building safety official. After these factors are dealt with, the conditional protest is automatically lifted by the clerk's office. In fact, several of the items we have before us today have very recently completed items listed under their conditional protests. So we'll pass the conditional protest today and it will be lifted tomorrow after the clerk's office certifies that all the conditions have been met. I hope that helps to explain why we have so many 15 items on our agenda, a lot more than usual, and what a conditional protest means. Last, it is one of my joys as chair to recognize those on the Assembly or who serve in the legislative branch who have achieved a milestone of service. Very recently, Assemblymember Forrest Dunbar celebrated 5 years of service on the Assembly. So congratulations, Mr. Dunbar, and here is your 5-year pin. Want to take a picture of us? Where do you want us? Okay. All right, that concludes the Assembly Chair's report. Next, we'll move on to committee and liaison reports. I'll go ahead start on this side with Mr. Presverdia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No report tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Health Policy Committee meets tomorrow via Teams from 10 to 11:30. This is a committee I co-chair with Ms. LaFrance. We'll be discussing the COVID-19 transition and touching on 3 main areas, testing and vaccines, contracts and logistics, and mass care. So we hope you can join us for that. And then on the 19th of May will be the Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting, and we will be reviewing the next draft of shelter licensing, as well as hearing about another housing program available in Anchorage that may not be on our radars. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. The Enterprise and Utility Oversight Committee will be meeting next Thursday at 11 a.m., I believe still via Teams, and the subject of the meeting will be Merrifield and their implementation of their CARES Act funding, and also a visit from Launch Alaska, who is working on a project on Merrifield.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No report this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to announce that tomorrow the Public Safety Committee meeting will be meeting at noon, and it will be Teams Live, so there can be people present here if they choose to be, or can still use the Teams app on that. And on that meeting, we'll be getting the annual report from the Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department by Chief Benningfield, and we will at least see what update we might have in regard to the body cam policy that Anchorage Police Department is working on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Nothing to report, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Budget and Finance Committee of the Whole will meet next Thursday, May 20th, 1 to 2 p.m. over Teams. And so far, it's a standard agenda with actuals and revenue reports. So if members have any items they want to add, please let me know, or Mr. Perez-Verdia. The Audit Committee will also be meeting on Thursday, May 20 at 2:10 p.m. via Teams. And right now, we have several items on the agenda, 2 audit requests from committee members, one for the CARES Act hospitality relief funds and the tax cap calculation. We also will be discussing the P-card audit, which is going to be released this Thursday or Friday. We'll get an update on the status of the annual report, and there is an item on tonight's agenda, 10F2, that we could add if any members are interested. That's regarding the Community Right to Know program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a Zoom meeting call today with members from 83 communities around the state. AML was giving a presentation on the outline that came out from the Treasury Department on how we're going to be using the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds. And there's a lot of rules and regulations and information there, and I'm sure we'll all be getting updates more about that as time goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm probably going to bring up and discuss in our next Ethics and Elections Committee meeting to work through many codes to be addressed. To name a few: security cameras, adjudicating ballots, election transparency, curing ballots, efficiency and cost of mail-in ballots, and many others. But I just wanted to give our chair, Pete Peterson, a heads up. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, actually before we get to the addendum, I need to go through our late on the table items. So far we only have one, but I think as the Mayor stated, we will have another item here soon. So right now we have a supplemental item, so we don't need to take a vote. I'll just read it into the record. It's laid on the table 10B1A AM 308-2021 by Assemblywoman Allard. It is tied to AR 2021-166, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly regarding the mayor's proclamation of emergency and the mayor's and acting mayor's orders and regulations issued thereunder. That is the only item I have right now. Like I said, we'll have another item soon. All right, next we have the addendum to the agenda. Mr. Vice Chair.
Move to incorporate the addendum to the agenda and the laid on the table item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, that motion is approved. Next, we have appearance requests and initial audience participation. I will just skip that. So for audience participation, please direct your comments to the Assembly Chair. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and personal attacks are not appropriate. In addition, audience members are asked to avoid clapping or other disruptions during audience participation. Last, during audience participation, Assembly members generally do not answer questions or respond to comments. We may talk to you offline during a break or after the meeting to address any questions you have. I will, as chair, work to maintain decorum at this meeting and ask for your assistance. Okay?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
point of personal privilege, I believe, if I could please.
Sure.
I wanted to know if we could possibly ask our municipal clerk, Ms. Barbara Jones, to talk a little bit about what happened today. There was a bit of an anomaly at the election center, and I just thought she might want to explain that for the good of the public. And I mean, I got the memo, but the public probably needs to know how that was handled. So if we could give her a minute to do that, I think it could answer some questions. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to turn it over to Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Kennedy. Through the chair, today was kind of an interesting day at the election center. The municipal clerk's office and the MOA election team always practices safety. We've had a number of safety briefings. We actually have a rally point. And so today we got to practice that when a fire alarm went off. And our safety coordinator got us all to the location, and we did a tally or a roll call of everybody that was there, and we had each of the teams make sure all of the teams were there, and then we made sure all of our observers were there. The hard part was walking out of the election center with ballots on our tables, but our training tells us that personal safety is more important than the ballot envelopes, and so we did it. We put as much in the cages as we could, and then we were outside for a while, but AFD came and they did some outdoor checking to figure out what was going on. There's access to the fire alarm security from the outside. We had one of the observers from each of the two campaigns with us, watching the fire department in the closet, and the fire department said they needed to go into the building. So again, we had one observer from each of the campaigns and myself and Captain Strahan, and we went into the building and walked around the yellow brick road a little bit, and Captain Strahan identified a fire detection device that he believed was defective. And he asked us to call the fire security company, who we did call, came out, and will probably be coming again to fix that device when all of the ballots are off the floor. When we returned to the building, it was kind of like, it was a little bit like an orchestration. So, you know, there were probably about 60 people in the room, so it was a lot of people. And so we had all the election workers come in and line up. And then we had the observers come in and line up in front of them. And then we assigned the teams, team to team, to go back to work so that the observers could see them going back to work and not handling ballots without the observers being able to see it. And then the observers took their spot and we got back to work. And fortunately, the fire company said, well, we can do this, but the alarm might go off again. And we said, no, do not do that again. So hopefully that'll get resolved before tomorrow. So thank you for the opportunity to explain that, Ms. Kennedy. It was an exciting day.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Well, thanks. So, I mean, there would be, of course, a fear that maybe someone was tampering with ballots or something while no one was in the building. But so is there a camera, were the cameras on the whole time, or what's the situation there?
Yes, Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Ms. Jones. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on to initial audience participation. Welcome. Yeah, you're up.
My name's Charles McKee. I'm a hold in due course to my title. I'm a beneficiary of the McKee Trust, and I presented with the Assembly with a newspaper of May 4th, and the headlines is the state pocketed thousands of dollars belonging to foster youth across the country, not just to Alaska. But essentially the same thing is occurring with workers' comp, and that's why I presented this to you, and this is why I asked civil action to be taken by the U.S. Attorney General pertaining to Alaska in my own personal case. I mentioned last time I was before the Assembly about how I was shocked to find out that you people might not be interested in the intangible, the soul, the spirit of the person. But when you form a relationship, a working relationship with the court system, and their interest is intangible as well as tangible, and their interest is to entrap the individual, male or female, that walks up and presents their case to the court through the judge at that time. So I was shocked then, and still am, because the whole process is we're supposed to be not in bondage, but yet we find ourselves being placed in bondage repetitively, time and time again. And apparently that's why I'm here, to address that matter, not just here but nationwide, because we have more people incarcerated. And I mentioned to the state representatives that when these people go incarcerated, they go off book. They go into the Bar Association portfolio, which is a private corporation. You could go to a bar, you go to a restaurant, you can take a napkin and write out the details of an agreement, and that's a contract. So that's no different than what I'm talking about. A contractual agreement could be drafted easily at any time, and that's what's happened. And you negotiated away your rights, and you could be entrapped, and that's why I'm talking about this. It's very deceptive, and that's why I asked this matter to be taken upon. If you look at the page, fourth page in, about the Assembly note, letter sent to my landlord, which caused this whole situation to occur with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is James Wojciechowski. I live in District 5, represented by Weddleton, or not Weddleton, got it wrong, Peterson and Dunbar. I don't really have a whole lot to say. I think you all know what I would be here for anyway. You know, I'd like to see it totally end the emergency proclamation, get rid of it completely. There's no other step to wean into. I'll just give you some numbers. You may or may not know them, but it's worth knowing. Right now in Anchorage, 7-day rolling average, 9 cases per 100,000, according to the dashboard, which is less than 10 per 100,000. I'm not sure why the mayor picked an arbitrary number of 70% vaccinated. I certainly can't find any scientific data saying that that's an important threshold to reach. But right now, first dosing of the vaccine in Anchorage, 56% over the age of 16, 82.5% over 65, the actual vulnerable people. Age 20 to 39, you have 26,176 known cases. And if you divide that, figure out what percentage of that is of the adult population in Anchorage, you're looking at 13%. So add that 13% to your 56%. You're at your 70, actually 69. Maybe you can give me 1% and say we're there. As I said, I don't really have a lot to say. I mean, been hammering you with emails. I backed off a little bit because there's just not much more to say. I'm just saying the same thing over and over and over again. The masks at this point really are nothing more than theater. And that's fine. If you want theater, let theater happen. but let people decide if they want the theater. Let them wear a mask if they want to wear a mask, if they think it's helping them. I'm fully vaccinated. I don't need a mask. And I'm not going to give anybody COVID. The odds of that are next to zero. You got a better chance of getting hit by a bolt of lightning. That's pretty much all I have to say, as I said, unless somebody has a question.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Welcome.
For the record, my name is Louis Imbriani. I've spoken to this body many times before, and I'm here again today to say that the emergency proclamation needs to end now. There's no emergency. At the April 13th Assembly meeting, we heard from the administration as to why they feel an extension was needed. Their sources were the Associated Press, the Rolling Stone, the Atlantic, and Bloomberg. All of this was just panic porn. The Atlantic article was an opinion piece, and the article from Bloomberg actually said in the title, opinion. Here we are, a month later, and we aren't even close to what was predicted. States like Texas and South Dakota have had all restrictions lifted, if they ever had any, for over a month now, and we have not seen spikes or increases of any kind. They've actually seen decreases in case counts. Mr. Constant, you said at the last Assembly meeting that you spent a lot of time traveling all over the municipality from Girdwood to Eklutna and witnessed various stages of compliance, 50-50 at best. I've said it before, and throughout this 14-month time, that people have been gathering in large groups and unmasked against the emergency orders. The emergency orders that have been put in place are because they're immediately necessary for the protection of human life. If this were the case, people not wearing masks and not social distancing would be dying immediately, but we aren't. Oh, but the mayor can use whatever means necessary to prevent the transmission of infectious disease. Well, the mayor also needs to be cognizant and protective of individual civil liberties. How are you protecting civil liberties if you, through these mandates, are telling me where I can go, who I can see, when I can go out, what type of activities I can engage in, and what type of medical testing I must undergo, as well as what I must wear and how I must wear it? I know that a lot of them have been rolled back or scaled back, but they're still in place and they still encroach on the civil liberties, particularly the mask. Oh, sorry, we don't have legal precedents to say that masks violate constitutional rights. But if I have to remove my mask up here to talk to you so you can better understand me, you're already violating the least restrictive means. The state has ended the emergency proclamation. JBER ended theirs months ago. Now it's time for us to end ours. That's it. If you have any questions, I'll take them.
No? Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Michael Savitt, and there are two topics that I'd like to address. One will be in the form of questions, which I understand you have no obligation to answer, but I'd like to pose them nevertheless. So I'll start with our election process. My understanding was it was over at 9:30 last night, and yet at 11 o'clock, or several minutes before 11, there was someone with a box standing outside of the door to get in with the box. And at 11 o'clock, the clerk and another individual were seen as well. Now, if 9:30 rolls around and the observers are told it's time to go home, why were other people there? There may have been no wrongdoing, but it gives the perception that there could have been. As far as the fire alarm going off, that's one hell of a coincidence that it would happen to go off during ballot counting. Just as coincidental as water mains breaking back in November. So it leads to the perception that there could be a problem. And regardless of the outcome, someone is going to cry foul. We need to get our act together. We need to obey our own rules, and so far we're not. Now, to change topics and go to the emergency orders, my understanding is the governor of the great state of Alaska has said the pandemic is over. There is no need for emergency orders. The last time I checked, state superseded municipality. Therefore, the municipality can't say, sorry, we're going to ignore you and do what we want anyway. The governor has said it's over and done with. He has given certain provisions for that, which we are superseding. There is no justification for any of it, both legally and medically. And I speak medically as a physician who has worked through the HIV/AIDS epidemic, through SARS in 2009, so I know what I'm talking about. I understand what precautions need to be taken and what don't need to be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question for you, sir, from Ms. Allard.
Okay.
Do you want to expand a little bit on what you know about the information from last night? You said it happened at about 11 o'clock at night at Ship Creek?
Yes, YouTube and one of your favorites, Must Read Alaska, had information on this. There was observers who went back and for whatever reason chose 11 o'clock to make sure that things were secure and found that they were not, and reported that someone was seen, a woman was seen with a box trying to get in, that the door was actually opened. I don't know if the person went in or not. Also that the clerk was seen with another individual whose name I don't remember at 11 o'clock. Now, there may very well have been justification for that, but again, perception is reality, and there's going to be questions about this. I think it would also be a good idea if the 30 minutes that everybody was outside during the fire alarm, that if that security tape could be aired publicly, and it may already be available, but if it could be aired publicly, I think that's important to reassure everyone that there was no wrongdoing done at that time.
Chair, can I make a comment?
Sure.
I've already requested tape for the last 24 hours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Dustin Darden. I want to thank and congratulate the new police chief, Mccoy, and for your stand for our inalienable rights that are granted to us by God in these United States of America. Furthermore, the inalienable rights that we have in these United States of America were granted to us by God. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights were written so that oppressive governments would have no option but to obey our inalienable God-given rights. I am here to tell you today, as a sitting municipal government with the municipal assembly and the mayor, you are violating our God-given rights to muzzle the citizens against their will. We were made in the image of God. To cover our face is an insult and a disgrace. The founding fathers of these United States of America made it very clear that all rules, regulations, and laws are not to be followed when they are in direct violation of our inalienable God-given rights. Yesterday, through the chair, I was dancing on the streets and making eye contact with individuals in our community. I noticed a sardine can-sized large group of individuals, through the chair Forrest Dunbar, through the chair Christopher Constant, through the chair Mrs. LaFrance, not wearing any face covering. Not that I have a problem with that, but the hypocrisy of you two mandate an inalienable right. Violation of the face covering is not a law that I intend to follow, because God made me this way. He made hairs in my nose. He made mucus. He made spit.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Kroom. I don't want to be here in front of you. I am broken within inside of myself. On December 22nd of 2020, my child went missing in this town. It has been 141 days since she's been missing. And I do not feel that the Anchorage Police Department has done anything except sit around and wait for the phone to ring of whatever the outcome is. I've requested that they turn the investigation over to Operation Lady Justice, which they wouldn't. My child is native. She's 17. While there's things that I cannot legally discuss tonight, it is inherent to me by the conduct, and when you talk to APD, that they say, oh yeah, we're working it, but I don't feel that. I don't feel it in their tone. So tonight I ask that the Anchorage Assembly ask the Anchorage Police Department to suspend and to turn it over to the, hang on here just for a second, I'm so upset. To the Missing Murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives Unit. It's called MMU. Secretary of Interior, Madam Haugland, on the 1st of April of 2021, started this task force. And I asked at the Assembly to start an investigation and then open a dialogue with me as a parent over my concerns. I will tell you that the Internal Affairs is involved. It is frustrating that I have to come before you and that it has taken this long. I don't know. I'm broken, folks. I'm just broken.
Thank you, sir. I have a few folks here for you. Ms. Allard?
I'm really sorry you're going through this, but I can assure you, I personally will talk with Chief and see what other remedies we can do to help you figure this all out.
I just think that it's time that the Anchorage Police Department just walk away and turn it over to an actual federal unit. And let's get them involved, because that's what they're there for. They've not been interested in even trying to even ask for help. I've been in contact with the Operation Justice lady, and they've reached out, and they can't get involved unless Anchorage Police Department asked for it. They can't overstep their jurisdiction. but it just seems that Anchorage Police Department is just not interested in being diligent. I'm sorry, I'm extremely upset.
Sir, can you email me your information?
Somebody give me something, yeah.
Okay, I'll get it from you. I'll get it from you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I can't imagine the pain you're going through. So thanks for coming. You're actually holding up super well. Yeah, and then just please do email us.
Yes.
Just a few. It doesn't have to be long. Just kind of the key points you made here would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Irene Quinn now, and I know you can't answer any questions, but I want to point out a discrepancy. So on April 13th, you voted on extending the emergency powers for the mayor, and it was voted 6 yes and 4 no. And you, Mr. Chair, said that it passed. Today I printed out, this is from the Muni website. You go to muni.org, you go to COVID-19 update, gets you to the homepage, and then you can click on emergency orders. Oh, and I need to back up. I have to say that there was some confusion about that the vote needed to be 3/4 according to the charter, and then somebody else said that doesn't apply. So there's confusion there. So I went to the website, have been for several days. Today I printed it out, and it says emergency orders currently in effect. It says emergency order 13 version 5, emergency order 20 version 2, and then it says the attachments of emergency order version 20 version 2 are now recommendations and can be found here. At the bottom of this page, it reads, the emergency declaration that gives the mayor authority to issue emergency orders, extended by the Assembly until April 14th, 2020, until June 5th, 2020, until July 31st, 2020, until October 16th, 2020, until November 30th, 2020, until January 15th, 2020, and then until April 16th, 2021. I'm sorry, and it was January of 2021. So according to your own website, the emergency orders are in effect, but the emergency powers of the mayor were not extended because the last date that's listed is April 16th, and that's in the past. So my question to you is there an oversight because you voted to extend them, or was the vote that was taken actually not legal? And as I said, I know you can't answer that, but I would like you to look into that because not everybody is here during the meetings, and they would go to your website to look of what's the most current. And right now, even though it lists the emergency orders, the mayor, according to your webpage, does not have the power to issue that order. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Next, we have the consent agenda. So consent agenda items number 10A through 10F are 15 or non-controversial items such as bid awards, new business, information and reports, and ordinances and resolutions for introduction. The items on the consent agenda may be approved by the Assembly by a single vote on a motion to approve the consent agenda. Prior to approval, items may be pooled by an Assembly member for discussion and separate vote on each of those items. Under the Assembly Rules of Procedure, all ordinances and some resolutions will have an opportunity for public hearing on a future date. Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and go down the dais, see what members would like to pull. I'll start on this side with Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to pull one tonight. It's 10.B.1.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No items this evening.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No items.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Nothing to pull, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull item 10A1.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull 10A2 for reading. Also, I should have asked this for the clerk's office. I also have here the Hmong permanent resolution. What's the procedure for that tonight? You're saying we have a new procedure for the permanent resolutions?
Yes, Mr. Dunbar, we thought you could request a moment of personal privilege to read this one because this is one of the recognition resolutions that the Assembly passed as permanent days each year. So you don't need to reapprove it, but we thought you might like to read it.
Okay. And for the chair, what's the timing we're going to be doing for those personal privileges?
Yeah, I would suggest you do it after we read the ones on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I would just like to add 10D Delta 5.
Thank you. Ms. Zalatel?
10A3 and 10 Delta 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Padilla?
No additional items. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, let me go ahead and go through the list. So I have items 10A, 1, 2, and 3, 10B, 1, and 10D, 4, and 5. Are there any additional items? Hearing none, Mr. Vice Chair?
Move to approve the consent items less the ones pulled. Consent agenda less the ones pulled.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, hearing none, then that motion is approved. So for the public's information, the Assembly has now passed or accepted all items in 10A through 10F, other than the ones that were just pulled, which we will take up next, or that have been introduced for a future public hearing, which are all the items in 10G. If you are here to see action on an item listed on the consent agenda that was not pulled, those items have been passed or accepted. All right, let me go ahead and start going through the items that were pulled, starting with 10A1, AR number 2021-162, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 9th through 15th, 2021 as Police Memorial Week and remembering and honoring those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our community. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I understand we have an amendment by Assemblywoman Allard. Is there a motion?
Chair, I move to motion to add that amendment to the AR, please.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Ms. Allard, do you want to speak to the amendment?
I just took note that the names that were mentioned on the resolution was for a few of the fallen peace officers and police officers. So I just added everybody within the state of Alaska that have given their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Is there any opposition to approval of the amendment? Okay, seeing none, that amendment is approved. Is there any opposition to approval of the resolution? Seeing none, the resolution is approved. Who's reading, who's presenting?
Mr. Chair, I'm reading.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm presenting.
A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 9th through 15th, 2021 as Police Memorial Week and remembering and honoring those who made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our community. Whereas Police Memorial Week is an opportunity to pay tribute to the memory of fallen law enforcement officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our community, and to recognize those who currently serve by enforcing our laws, bringing criminals to justice, and making our communities safer. And whereas the citizens of the Municipality of Anchorage fulfill an important civic responsibility by supporting the work of law enforcement in protection of our community, and whereas behind the name of each officer who died in the line of duty lies a story of courage and devotion, as well as a deep sense of loss for the service, the country, and above all for friends, family, and partners. We can never repay these gallant men and women for their service, nor adequately comfort their families. We can only honor their memory in our determination to forge a stronger, safer community which they helped purchase with their lives. And whereas since 1897, 68 law enforcement officers have fallen statewide, including the Anchorage Police Department officers who gave their lives in the line of duty. Sorry, I need to read that better. Listed in Attachment A, including the following Anchorage Police Department officers who gave their lives in the line of duty. Chief John J. Sturgis, 1921. Chief Harry C. Kavanaugh, 1924. Officer Benjamin F. Strong, 1968. Officer William G. Falmer, Jr., 1970. Officer Jonathan P. Flora, 1975. Officer Harry Keir, 1980. Officer Harry B. Hansen, Jr., 1986. Officer Louis G. Mazzell, 1989. And Officer Dan R. Seeley, 1996. Officer Justin T. Woolham, 2001. And therefore be it resolved that the Anchorage Assembly remembers and honors all those officers who have died in the line of duty by recognizing May 9th through 15th, 2021 as Police Memorial Week. Be it further resolved that the Anchorage Assembly encourages all residents to thank the men and women who serve our community and protect our citizens, and to remember and honor the fallen who gave their lives in this service. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 12th day of May, 2021.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Acting Chief Ken McCoy of the Anchorage Police Department. First of all, I just want to say thank you for honoring the fallen heroes of Alaskan law enforcement. Their sacrifices will never be forgotten, and we will always hold their service in our hearts. This resolution also serves as a reminder to the men and women who are out there right now patrolling our streets, keeping us safe, that you and this community supports them. So again, I want to say thank you, and it's an honor for us to serve.
Thank you for your service. Next, we have item 10A2, resolution AR number 2021-163, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 2021 as Asian American and Pacific Islander AAPI Heritage Month. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any opposition to approval of this item? Seeing none, this item is approved. Who is reading? Who's presenting?
I'll be reading. Resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 2021 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Whereas there are more than 20 million Asian American and Pacific Islanders in the United States, whose contributions make America a more dynamic and vibrant nation. With Anchorage home to more than 38,000 residents who trace their roots to Asia and the Pacific Islands. And whereas the Asian and Pacific Islander American community adds a vital dimension to Anchorage's diverse ethnic and social fabric, whose languages, cultures, traditions, and religious beliefs enrich neighborhoods in all parts of the city. And whereas through Asian and Pacific Islander Americans' love of family, community, and hard work, they've helped to uphold the welcoming spirit of our city for generations. Asian and Pacific Islander entrepreneurs strengthen our economy and our community through their hard work, dedication, and ingenuity, inspiring the next generation of Alaskan innovators. And whereas the Municipality of Anchorage, through engagement and dialogue with members of the AAPI communities, is committed to addressing the needs and concerns of the AAPI communities And 2, a proactive approach that seeks solutions to issues that disproportionately impact AAPI communities, including prejudice, discrimination, racism, and discrepancies in healthcare. And whereas Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month provides an opportunity to promote the study of Asian American Pacific Islander history and culture, instill in our youth the importance of education, history, and ethnicity in creating brave spaces and positive role models, while honoring the contributions of trailblazing members of the AAPI community in Anchorage and Alaska. And whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who've made an important contribution to Alaska include State Senator Scott Kawasaki, the first and only Asian American to serve in the state Senate, past Representative Thelma Buckholt, the first Asian American to serve in the State House of Representatives, past Council Member and Deputy Mayor Jesse V. Viscocho, City of Kodiak, Dr. Anthony Nakazawa, Professor of Extension Emeritus, University of Alaska Fairbanks, and Elsa M. Sargento, Bridge Builders Anchorage founder and community leader, Alaska Women's Hall of Fame and Asian Academy Hall of Fame awardee. Now therefore, the Anchorage Assembly recognizes May 2021 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 12th day of May 2021.
Welcome.
Honorable Assembly members and Acting Mayor Quinn Davidson, on behalf of the Asian American Pacific Islander Coalition of Alaska and our members here present, we really would like to thank you for recognizing the importance of the AAPI communities and the contribution that we've had. I am also heartbroken because we have become so highly divisive, highly toxic partisanship. I remember what the framers of the Constitution, I've been hearing a lot of our community members here said that they're wary of two parties becoming so strong, that the majority can oppress the minority, and that is true from both sides. But it's good to reflect, that there's no such thing, in my opinion, as absolute. There's only one absolute, and that is the great Almighty, okay? That's just my personal opinion. But in addition to that, let me just say that the cause of prejudice is lack of exposure, okay? When we hear the word prejudice, we have a tendency to elevate it to racism or discrimination. Discrimination can be positive, okay? We can discriminate between right and wrong, what is rational or irrational. What we need to do as a community is at least to pause and reflect, because culture have ownership of a term. When we say, let's stop the hate, we refer to this group immediately as something with an agenda. We don't even think, okay, is there something going on really? So what we're asking right now as we celebrate this month is at least to pause, and reflect that these terminologies, whether it means different things to all of us, we all don't subscribe to victim mentality. Is it really, can we have a blind eye or a deaf ear to what's going on around us just because of the terminology that we don't like, that we don't agree with? So we would like to take this opportunity, in the month of May, that the Asian American Pacific Islander communities, that we are here, we have a positive impact, and we're willing to be a part of the change that is needed to move Anchorage forward, in the right direction, not being unreasonable or irrational, but being rational, reasonable, and being civil with each other as we continue to respect, not only the different cultures, but the diversities that is our strength, rather than a weakness. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have item 10A3, AR number 2021-164, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly in support of Anchorage child care providers and recognition of their work during the COVID-19 pandemic. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any opposition to the resolution? Seeing none, that resolution is approved. Who's reading, who's presenting?
I am reading, Mr. Chair.
And I am presenting.
A resolution of the Anchorage Assembly in support of Anchorage child care providers and recognition of their work during the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas the Municipality of Anchorage has 242 licensed child care providers, including 118 centers and 120 homes from Girdwood to Chugiak. And whereas child care providers are the critical part of the infrastructure to support working families and a strong workforce throughout the municipality. And whereas child care providers are open during summer, winter, and many of the regular school breaks and holidays, and some providers care for children overnight to facilitate parents working night shifts. And whereas child care providers have remained open to provide care to children since the start of the year 2020 in spite of all of the challenges that COVID-19 has brought them. And whereas child care providers have continued to adapt to an ever-changing world and have created reasonable mitigation plans to keep children safe while continuing to provide them education and attention and all other elements of a young child's development during these times of uncertainty. And whereas many child care providers have created new programs to facilitate virtual learning to support parents who could not stay home from work. And whereas child care providers have provided an element of normalcy and fun to children who are growing up in a year that has caused many stresses to young children and families. And whereas child care providers have continued to rise to the occasion and are leading the way through the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the time with a smile on their face because they love what they do. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly celebrates, honors, and recognizes the child care providers within the Municipality of Anchorage for the great work they have done to provide support for working families and the smallest members of our community. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 12th day of May, 2021.
Welcome.
Hello, thank you, Chair and members of the Assembly, and Mayor Quinn Davidson. I'm Stephanie Berglund, the CEO of Thread, and we are delighted to be here to join you in celebrating and honoring Anchorage's early childhood education workforce, the incredible early educators that we have, and the early childhood education programs that we have throughout our great city. Thank you for acknowledging the challenging year that we've all had, but they have had, especially childcare programs stayed open throughout the pandemic. And as you acknowledged, taking the best care of our youngest members in the community and providing safe, healthy, and fun environments for them. So they themselves were essential workers and also helping to care for other essential workers in our community. I want to thank you for not only recognizing them, but partnering with Thread and early childhood education programs this last year through your leadership, through the CARES support. That financial support and your leadership through COVID has continued to help them provide safe businesses and help provide stability that they need to ensure ongoing success and sustainability of their care businesses. Just want to thank you for all of your leadership this last year, and especially for recognizing the importance of the early childhood workforce. And it is an honor to celebrate them with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple folks in the queue. Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Ms. Berglund, for coming. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank our constituent from Abbott Loop, Grace Green, who brought this to the community council level, to our attention, as well as to the state level. So I really wanted to make sure she got recognition for elevating this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
I'm probably bringing up too big of a topic for proclamation like this, but I think there's a federal program, a new one, that focuses on child care. And how does Thread let child care people know about this, or how's all that coordinated?
Through the chair, thank you. Are you talking about the federal stimulus dollars?
Yes.
Yes. There's a large allocation of federal stimulus dollars from the last two packages that are totaling over
$92 million for childcare designated specifically in Alaska. So the state is in process of planning how that will be distributed, but that does include a large portion of childcare grants to programs for stabilization funding. And there's also intent of the bill that will include financial support for families so they can have more affordability in childcare.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. My question is how are the grants impacting your ability to get providers to come back to work? I spoke to Bright Beginnings this week. It's a vicious cycle. Parents want to go back to work. They can't go back to work. There's no daycare providers. Can you kind of hit on that a little bit of maybe what you think a solution can be? I know.
Through the chair, thank you, Ms. Allard, for your question. Well, the good news is most of our childcare programs in Anchorage are open. So over 90% of our total programs pre-COVID are open. We are seeing difficulties right now in Anchorage with recruiting and retaining a qualified workforce. So would love to partner with you on solutions for that. I think that's, we've seen that in the news and other issues for other workforces, a challenge of recruiting talented workforce. But we also are still seeing a temporary lull in demand from families as our behaviors haven't all shifted back to, what they were pre-COVID. So some families still are keeping their children home. Others cannot currently afford to return to childcare. So we're seeing programs still struggling and a bit fragile as they are having continued increased operating costs and still having reduced capacity for the number of children that they're serving.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Mr. Constant,
Yeah.
Actually, ma'am, if you can come back.
Just
Sorry, go
one
on.
last note. We don't have the draft version before us for introduction tonight for our rescue plan allocations, but I know that we have one item that probably will help you and your providers, and that is we are looking at funding technical assistance for organizations to apply. So we're going to be able to help at least your various kind of category of operators to be able to access the federal dollars. The state dollars should be pretty easy, but the federal dollars are always such a challenge. So I believe we put money in for that, and I look forward to seeing it so that we can be of a real help to all of the people to get for Alaskans what we can.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Quickly, thank you for that comment. I just wanted to add appreciation for that recognition that we're finding that early education programs are recognizing a need for financial support and then don't always know how to navigate that, and it can be pretty intimidating. So we're happy to help build that bridge, so thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have item 10B1, AR number, oh, that's right, yeah, before we move on. Go ahead, Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to request a moment of personal privilege.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I've been asked, and I think we're going to start doing this more often, I've been asked to read one of our permanent resolutions. So this is, and so we're not passing these resolutions, we're just going to be reading them on the days when they occur. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 15th as Hmong American Veterans Memorial Day in Anchorage. Whereas in 1960, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency recruited Hmong to fight against Communist Pathet Lao and the North Vietnamese Army in Laos. And by 1961, Hmong tribesmen were conducting guerrilla operations in Laos, and up to 100,000 Hmong were recruited and trained as special guerrilla units to engage the North Vietnamese Army. And whereas the U.S. relied heavily on Hmong special guerrilla units to conduct tactical guerrilla actions, protect U.S. personnel, guard U.S. Air Force radar installations, gather critical intelligence, fly thousands of combat and rescue missions, and fight in conventional and guerrilla combat. And whereas Hmong soldiers suffered severe casualties, including 40,000 killed, 50,000 seriously injured and disabled, and 3,000 missing in action. But due to the covert nature of the U.S. war effort in Laos, the full story of the sacrifices and service of Hmong veterans remains largely untold. And whereas because the U.S. government recruited the Hmong to fight for the U.S., thousands of family members of Hmong soldiers were evacuated to safety at a U.S. air base in Thailand. And at the war's conclusion, thousands of Hmong soldiers fled to Thailand to avoid acts of retribution. And whereas approximately 50,000 Hmong Vietnam-era veterans reside in the U.S., and 150,000 Hmong and Laotian-born children have graduated from schools in this country, and it is important for future generations of Hmong Americans and all Americans to learn the full history of the Hmong people's honorable service to the United States. And whereas Anchorage is home to more than 6,000 Hmong who enrich the fabric of our community as they proudly share their history, culture, and tradition of service. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes May 15th as Hmong American Veterans Memorial Day and urges all residents of Anchorage to remember and honor the Hmong veterans for their service and sacrifice with appropriate ceremonies and activities. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 7th day of May, 2019.
Great, thank you. And yeah, and the clerk's office has advised me that we have 2 of these types of resolutions that are permanent, the one that was just read, and as well as Indigenous Peoples Day. So when we get to those, we'll make sure that those are read on a regular basis. Okay. Next, we have item 10B1, resolution AR number 2021-166. Resolution of the Anchorage Assembly regarding the Mayor's proclamation of emergency COVID-19 and the Mayor's and acting Mayor's orders and regulations issued thereunder. What is the will of the body?
Chair, I'd like to motion to move this, please.
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded, a motion to approve on the table. Okay, so I understand we have 2 amendments. We have Allard Amendment number 1. We'll start with that one. Is there a motion?
I motion to move it, please.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Ms. Allard, do you want to speak to it?
I do. Let's see. This will impact in regards to some of the things that economically with the restrictions of procurement and law allocations of the municipal resources would end, but it is impossible to quantify the significant impact of it. But I am requesting that we do terminate our emergency proclamation. It's time, and we have the state that is open, fully open, and I do believe the governor, beginning on June 1st, will not have masks being mandated in state offices. And we need to move forward with our communities being able to do the things that they need to do without feeling restricted. The Department of Homeland, or the Department of Health and Social Services has it in place where if there is any COVID emergencies, regardless if it's vaccine, whether it's testing, this is already in place in the state and we can rely on them to help us out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton on the amendment.
Well, thanks. I do support this. And regarding the procurement rules, we have an item later on in the evening, and should that pass, I mean, even now the mayor has a lot of on skipping the procurement rules when it's necessary. And should the item later in the agenda pass, it makes that even easier and more clear. And then allocation of municipal resources, we have an item regarding municipal employees teleworking, working from home, that will also kind of resolve a lot of that issue. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Verdia on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd actually like to hear from the administration. I'm interested specifically about the, not necessarily the health impact of this, but the economic impact of this in terms of our ability to, well, not just the sort of operational and economic impact of this, our ability to follow through with some of the commitments that we've made, our ability to allocate funds, our ability to sort of continue to do the things that we're planning on doing to help the recovery. So I'm curious about how ending these powers would impact that specifically.
Thank you. Who from the administration would like to respond?
Mr. Chair, I'm hoping Mr. Bockenstead will respond, but I just haven't reached him yet.
Mr. Chair, this is Jason Bockenstead. It was very, very hard to hear the on the phone the introduction of the amendment, so I don't even know what the amendment is to be able to comment on.
Thank you. So briefly, the amendment is to terminate the emergency proclamation.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to repeat my question as well?
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Bockenstedt, this is Mr. Perez-Verdilla. I'm posing the question. I'm interested in the impact that this will have on the city's ability to follow through with the commitments that we've made in terms of providing resources and allocating funds, and sort of operationally how this would impact our ability to do the things that we need to do to help our city recover right now, not necessarily on the health side, but on all the other ends.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Perez-Verdilla, putting aside the health aspects, I don't think ending the emergency is going to impact our ability to either enter into contracts with individuals. Certainly we have the ability to do that, and many of the contracts that we have, we've entered into already for an extended period of time. And for all of the new stuff, particularly around some of the rescue funds and things like that, I don't think the emergency declaration is going to impact our ability to get those out in a timely way.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, one other follow-up. Again, from the administration, so I wanted to clarify that part of it. And then I guess I just want to hear from the administration their perspective on the impact of terminating this. What is the impact from their lens that it will have on our city?
Who from the administration would like to respond?
Looks like Mr. Bockenstead is hoping that Ms. Harris, Director Harris, could respond. Heather, are you on the line?
I am. I'm sorry. I must have missed that question for the health permit. Could you repeat that again?
Sure. I asked Mr. Bockenstead about the impact terminating these powers would have in terms of operations and our ability to follow through with all of our the work that we're doing, and he indicated that it would not have an impact on that. So I'm curious about, from the city's perspective, the health impact of terminating these orders and what your perspective on that is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I heard the question around the financial implications. As far as health implications, I would just like to highlight again that we are working diligently at getting people vaccinated, but we're not quite there yet. And so, not having a mask mandate and providing that safety for those, especially in indoor settings, could definitely make a negative impact on our COVID case rates, which are in a pretty good position as of today.
So this is Dr. Johnson. If someone would like me to, I'm also happy to respond.
Go ahead. If you have further, please go ahead.
So my two concerns, one is our numbers are looking good in terms of average new case counts, but I think it is important for people to realize that interpreting those numbers today is different than how we would have interpreted them earlier when we didn't have as many people vaccinated. So the risk is higher than you would think for people who are unvaccinated and much lower for people who are vaccinated. My biggest concern is that we've just loosened restrictions about a week or so ago, and the effect of loosening those restrictions is not reflected in the current numbers. So from my perspective as an epidemiologist, I think it would make more sense to wait another 2 weeks to have enough data to see what the effect is of that first round of loosening before terminating the mask mandate.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to also just chime in a little bit about the fiscal that Mr. Perez-Verdia was concerned about. FEMA can still be implemented. So if we don't have an emergency declaration, it doesn't matter. FEMA can still be accessed. If we continue to dole out the funds from ARP, can still be accessed. So as far as the fiscal impact, I don't see it happening, and I agree with the administration on that. As far as the emergency declaration being terminated in general, it seems like we're hitting continuously on the point of the mask, and that will be the next amendment. But because it was brought up, I wanted to, do we have a medical doctor online first? And then the other thing I would say is, we as a body, I haven't actually sat down and spoken to any of my colleagues in depth about the mask. I see a lot of my colleagues not having it on. I think that's great. I see many of my colleagues that do have it on. That's also great. I think it's an option that we need to address that, I'm just going to say it, the political implications of a mask is now symbolic, and we need to stop. It has become symbolic politically. Let people make their own decisions. The mask, anywhere I read, doesn't say it stops anything. So I would like to challenge Dr. Johnston and see if we have a medical doctor online.
Our medical doctor is not online this evening. I would just respond and share that the CDC recently provided additional updates to the positive impacts that masks really do have on this, on COVID. And so while COVID has been made political, from the CDC perspective, there's evidence that a mask is effective for preventing COVID.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Yeah, I just wanted to also, actually, I'll just wait for the next amendment to correct myself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion on Allard Amendment Number 1, members may proceed to vote. That amendment fails 6-4. Next, we have Allard Amendment Number 2. Is there a motion?
Chair, I motion to move Amendment Number 2, please.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. And this is termination of the mask. And I did state just a few minutes ago that it's politically symbolic, and it's going to get to the point where I believe we're already the most hated body in the state of Alaska. And I just think this is wrong. We need to stop. We need to take away people's voices of covering their faces with a mask. The Anchorage School District is allowing children to play outside without their mask, which is outrageous to think that if you're outside, you have to cover your face, and that we have to ask permission to do so. We're obviously a divided body on this issue, but I'd also like to stand corrected. I said that I believe the governor was going to lift his mask mandate inside the buildings on 1 June, and actually it was effective yesterday. The rest of the state has a choice on whether they want to wear a mask or not, and I'm not quite sure why this body keeps saying we have to cover our faces. If we want to cover our faces as a body when we come in here, I think that's great. I will wear a mask in here so that I could speak up for the community members who don't want to wear a mask. And I can't do that if I come in here without one. But to say anybody else in their own businesses, their own areas, they have to put on a mask and use the businesses as a tool to do our dirty work, to tell them if you don't implement the mask mandate, you're going to get code enforcement knocking at your door, and we will do whatever we can if you don't follow those guidelines and take you to court, civil court. That's outrageous. This is not the way things should be. We do not have an emergency any longer. I will continue to disagree with Ms. Harris, who is not a doctor. I listen to all the same conversations that she listens to on Mondays and Wednesdays. I know exactly what they're pushing with the vaccines. That's fine. If people want to take the vaccines, they can. The mask needs to stop. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
I just don't even know where to start. The most hated body, that masks are political. These statements may in fact be true because of the mover of those comments. She makes it hard for me to say what I'm about to say because I don't do this for political theater or to grandstand or to put on a show because it's what a constituency of mine finds empowering. But instead, I stand with this body who's worked for a long time to protect the public health of this community. But my word is my word. And what I said in October was that when the case rate falls below 10, I will vote to end the mandate. And that day is today. Because science shows, not politics, but science shows that the case rates are down. I am tired of the member making this all about politics all the time when it's about lives. So I am going to vote yes on this amendment, but not because of the mover's commentary, but because of science.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't support the amendment, and this is actually the mask mandate is one of the reasons I can't support ending the emergency declaration until we have a little bit more time. I think about how we've watched the vaccine rollout and the expansion of age groups, but those under 12 still cannot be vaccinated. Those under 12 go to generally congregate settings in close quarters with one another in schools. And while COVID cases may be less severe amongst children, we still don't know the long-term implications, and some children do get very sick. So it's for those reasons, I keep at top of mind, we have a week and a day left of school, but we have a robust summer school program coming up by ASD. So I think we have to be very mindful of those who are not vaccine eligible yet. While a lot of us are and have been vaccinated and are kind of getting back to a sense of normalcy, I've spoken with a lot of parents where their children are not yet eligible, and caution is the name of the game. And I think exercising this caution at the very least through the end of the regular school year makes good sense. So I would ask you to keep that in mind as we consider this amendment, and I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on Allard Amendment Number 2. That amendment fails 5-5. We're now on the main motion. Is there any further discussion?
I move to postpone this item indefinitely.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Allard?
I would like to ask the mover why.
Through the chair, yes, this is what we typically do if there are no boxes checked on this particular resolution, has been our custom. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely. That motion is approved 9-1. Next, we have item 10D4, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 284-2021, 2021 Economic Development Grant to Anchorage Economic Development Corporation for the purpose of operational fees in the amount of $299,380. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ms. Alatel, you pulled this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like a little bit more information about this item, and it's my apologies for not having made that request in advance of this evening. I see the fund certifications coming out of multiple operating budgets, so I guess two questions. Was this a planned for grant to the AEDC, and why are we doing a grant if it was not? Thank you.
Thank you. Who from the administration can respond?
Yes, through the chair, this is Chris Schutte, Director of Economic and Community Development. Thank you for the question, some of the members Alatel. The short answer is this is an annual appropriation from the municipality to Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. We make contributions annually that are made up of individual contributions from utilities, as well as the municipality at large that you see broken down in that fund certification. And this is the annual municipal contribution to the AEDC operating budget. We are one of many funders of that organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schutte. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, before one last thing.
Mr. Constant?
Thank you. Bill, would you come up just briefly? So I read in the memo that this will be in some part supporting the RV work in the interim. I'm hoping you can speak briefly to that. Oh, it was on. There you go.
All right. Sorry. I goofed it up last time, so might as well goof it up again this time.
Yep.
Through the chair, Mr. Constant, this was a small amount of initial funding for the RVSA. This is to, in effect, reimburse the contractor who's been providing the facilitated support for developing and moving forward the RVSA, and will be paying them for work that they've been doing since, I believe, October. I'm doing that from memory, so don't hold me to that, as well as forward funding through the remaining part of the initial work. This is in advance of the funding request that I know has been brought forward to the Assembly and does not address that funding request at all.
So this is to cover up until if an appropriation is made under the rescue plan?
I believe this is going to cover us for a couple more months, up through July, if I'm remembering the contract that I've signed with SALT on behalf of the municipality to pass through those funds too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, members may proceed to vote on the main approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 10D5, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 285-2021, Sole Source Agreement to Alaska Basic Industries, Inc., ABI, to connect to and share a circulating water service line for the Municipality of Anchorage, Port of Alaska. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Constant, you pulled this?
Yeah, thank you. Just a question for Ms. Henderson, if she's on the line. I just would like the body to hear of this kind of creative solution, and the public as well. We didn't hear it before the committee, and just want to make sure everyone understands what's happening.
This is Anna Henderson, Municipal Manager. I had a hard time hearing the question. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I would like to ask you to brief the public on what this transaction is and why it happened, and just a little bit so that we have it in the record. It's, I think, a pretty smart idea, and I just want to make sure we speak to it briefly.
And just to clarify, we're on item 10D5.
Yeah, it's the ABI workaround for
Thank
water.
Yeah. And I also have Mr. Rebuffo and Sharon Welsh on the phone who can answer questions. So I'll defer to them for the initial response.
Okay, through the chair, this is Sharon Welsh, the director of the Port of Alaska Modernization Program. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yes, this is a arrangement. Just the idea of sharing a water service line is an arrangement that AWU does make available in certain situations, depending on the configuration of where the how the line can be accessed and you know what type of installation it is. In this case, this is a circulating water service line because it's relatively long, and keeping it as a circulating line keeps it running in the winter without issues. So when the port looked at servicing the petroleum and cement terminal with water, which is necessary for its operations, and also ABI has a small service line off this line, we saw that to bring a water service line from the main would be as much as would be 1,130 feet, which at $1,000 a foot roughly is quite a lot of money. However, ABI, when they built their cement dome, put in the circulating service line as a fire service line to serve a hydrant near the dome. And so it turned out that this made a lot of sense, and the design was met the requirements of AWU, and we will still be doing a shared service agreement in terms of how we're going to take care of the line and whatnot with each other, and AWU won't turn on the water until we've come to agreement on maintenance and shared maintenance and that kind of thing. But in the meantime, ABI did go to considerable expense to install this line as far as it went, and requested that as a condition of attaching to it, entering their property and so on, to requested that we pay 50% of the cost that they spent to put the line in, and that is savings of over $740,000 to the project to do this option versus bringing in our own service line, and that's why this arrangement was made. It actually, there is precedent set. PM&E has done some similar things, project management engineering, and that was the solution was based on an example that they gave us. So that's what brings us here tonight. It does help ABI recoup some of their costs, but most importantly, it saves money for the project and the municipality.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. With that, we're going to go ahead and that completes our consent agenda. We're going to go ahead and take a 20-minute break, and when we come back, we will be on item 11A. All right, I'm going to get us started again. So now we have item 11A before us, Assembly Memorandum number AM 268-2021, Urban Design Commission appointment. There is no motion pending on this item. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote. Ms. Kennedy, we are voting on the Urban Design Commission appointment. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 11B, ordinance number AO 2021-33S, as amended, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly suspending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 7.20.090 to allow temporary suspension of procurement rules in order to timely expend federal and state funds, including emergency and disaster relief funds. We do have a motion to approve on the floor, and there are, I believe, 3 amendments for us to look at today. So we'll go ahead and start with amendment number 1 from, and I believe all of these are from members Zalatel LaFrance and Acting Vice Chair Weddleton. So is there a motion on amendment number 1?
I move amendment number 1. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Who would like to speak to it?
I can briefly, Mr. Chair. This adds on the second page of the AO at line 43, waivers granted under A2, which is where the mayor may waive in writing the formal procedures under Title 7, that it shall be reported to the Assembly within 24 hours of issuance, and the Assembly may revoke a waiver by resolution. This was to get at concerns that were raised during previous debate on the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment? And for the public's information, we did review these 3 amendments at a work session, so if there isn't much discussion, that's why. Okay, seeing none, members may proceed to vote on amendment number 1. That amendment is approved 9-1. Next, we have amendment number 2. Is there a motion?
Move to approve amendment number 2. Second.
Moved and seconded. Who'd like to speak to this one?
I'll go ahead, Mr. Chair. This one simply changes the title on line 9 on page 2 under section 1 to read emergency procurements and waiver of formal procurement procedures.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, members may proceed to vote on amendment number 2. That amendment is approved 10-0. Next, we have amendment number 3 by the Vice Chair. Is there a motion?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I believe the amendment is how this ordinance is already as amended in comparing the language.
Let's go ahead and have a motion, and then if we need to, we can withdraw the motion. So can someone please move the amendment?
I move amendment 3.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Weddleton, if you want to speak to it.
I think this will be the briefest of all amendments that is already incorporated in the S, so I think we don't need to do it. Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Should I withdraw? I mean, you wanted me to?
All right. All right. Will the mover and seconder withdraw the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Both the mover and seconder have agreed to withdraw. Okay, so then we're now on the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Weddleton.
Oh, thanks. I just want to address something in conversations with the administration. They, and if Mr. Balkenstat's here and I speak in misrepresent, then please correct me. There was a sense that, we can do a resolution at any time. And so this parts 3 and 4 aren't necessary. But Mr. Gates kind of said that this code is created by ordinance, so we would typically have to do these actions in 3 and 4 by ordinance, were it not in our code as presented here. So this lets us do it by resolution, which can be much faster than by ordinance. And given that this deals with, typically emergency situations, or times maybe an emergency, but when we really have to get something done quickly, it is important to give ourselves the power to do it by resolution instead of ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 8-2. Next, we have item 11C, ordinance number AO 2021-42, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing a ground lease for certain real property with the Municipality of Anchorage, authorizing a facility lease, and authorizing the Chief Fiscal Officer to enter into a direct placement with a financial institution for the purpose of financing the payment for improvements on property owned by the Anchorage Community Development Authority.
Waive reading.
Thank you. All right. So we already had the public hearing on this item, and there is already a motion to approve on the floor. I understand that we have an amendment by Assembly Members Constant, LaFrance, and the Vice Chair. Constant, Weddleton, LaFrance, amendment number 1. Is there a motion?
Move the amendment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Who would like to speak to it?
I'll be happy to, Mr. Chair. The conversation last time circled around what is the funding source and how do we rationalize paying for it, and the workaround that was determined in the best interest of the municipality by the administration and supported by the movers is that instead it's a loan to ACDA, that the proceeds of the lease that we have with them will go to pay for the loan over the long term on the building. So I might not have that exactly right, but essentially it's a loan with repayment terms spelled out on the back of the amendment.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing no discussion, members may proceed to vote on Constant, Weddleton, LaFrance amendment number 1. That amendment is approved 10-0. We're now back on the main motion. Is there any discussion? Ms. Zolotel.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the administration and the sponsors of the amendment finding a way to position this as a loan. I can support this now because of that arrangement. I will, however, again, underscore the importance that we have the larger conversation about the role of ACDA and how we want to support affordable housing and housing projects within the municipality as a whole and what role they may play. And if this opportunity or other similar arrangements are ways in which the municipality wants to invest in that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 8-2. Next, we have item 12A, emergency ordinance number EO 2021-1, an emergency ordinance providing financial resources for labor, supplies, and other expenditures required to address municipal response to coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, by appropriating an amount not to exceed $13 million from an interfund loan from the area-wide general fund to the COVID-19 fund, approving a temporary exception to the unrestricted fund balance designation policy for the Municipality of Anchorage, and providing a plan for future reimbursement of such appropriations. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Weddleton.
Question for the administration on this. So, this is, for quite a long period of time, and I think we've done it for shorter periods before. What was the rationale for doing this for, instead of doing half as much for a shorter time?
Through the chair, this is Alex Lipka, Chief Fiscal Officer. The rationale is that we need to provide for contracting through September 30th, which we are contemplating as the probable end, hopefully, of a lot of these expenditures. And we need this authority in order to pursue those contracts, put those contracts in place. It doesn't mean that money will get spent. It just gives us the authorization to contract for it, and that's why we're asking for this amount over this time frame. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've done this kind of thing several times now, and, I just have significant concerns considering what I believe is happening with some of the financial problems that we face, that the state faces. We're up to $80 million now that we have spent on COVID, hoping that FEMA reimburses us and hoping that the state reimburses our match that's required. And we're looking at a state that can't even pay the $39 million in school bond debt reimbursement. And I will tell you that I was incredibly frustrated and highly disappointed by the fact that we ended up with a negative fund balance last year. But we obviously used that to cover our expenses. But we never really grappled with the fact that we had $29 million of a revenue shortfall. Yet, that's kind of coming around, I think, to bite us. And when I look at what this intends to do, the fact that we're going to continue to exempt ourselves from the policy on our required fund balance, we look at, I think we're looking at a lot more things that are coming due, in other words, that we haven't really wrestled with. And the more we do this, the more we actually put our taxpayers in debt. So 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, whenever it was, that we set the mill rate for 2021, we basically told the property owners that you now, lucky you, get to deal with the gap. You get to backfill that amount that we just weren't able to generate, the revenues that we weren't able to generate. And essentially, we're continuing that policy, that concept. And I have real concerns about what we are burdening our property owners with. And we keep kind of perpetuating this idea of, well, FEMA will pay it back, or maybe somehow we'll recover, or there'll be other funds that'll come in. To me, this is a typical, we're kicking the can down the road kind of a thing. But we always know that the way the code is written on the tax cap, that we will be able to recover the shortfall from the taxpayers. And I have just real concerns about the fact that we aren't looking at anything else other than we can always fall back on the taxpayer. We're not looking at, can we save a little bit of money? Can we decide maybe to defer some of these expenditures? We just we just basically keep saying, no, let's just exempt ourselves from a fund balance, yet we know at some point that's going to catch up to us. So for that reason, and just the fact that it seems to me like we're not asking the right questions right now, I'm going to have to vote no on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next in the queue, I have Mr. Buckenstead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get into the queue and correct at least one misstatement from the previous member, which is to say that there is no required match from the local or state government. When President Biden became president in January, he essentially waived all requirements for a local match, and the federal government is going to reimburse 100% of the costs through anything that the municipality, in our case, our municipality, but other states and local governments across the country, until at least September 30th of this year. So I just wanted to correct that so that was not on the record, that it somehow made it seem like we were going to have to come up with 25% of what we have spent so far. That is not true. The federal government is covering 100% of the costs that we have incurred to date so far. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question for Mr. Buckenstead or Mr. Slivka. Would one of you be able to give a status update on the FEMA reimbursement? We've talked before about some of the delays and why it's been delayed. Could you give an update? Thanks.
Yes, through the chair. This is Alex Slivka, Chief Fiscal Officer. The delay is really, I share Ms. Kennedy's disappointment that it has taken this long. I would say that the amounts of money that we are asking for reimbursement, we are confident that they are FEMA eligible and they will get reimbursed. What we're looking at is a process where in a normal year you'll have a disaster here or a disaster there, and in 2020 there was a disaster everywhere, and the state didn't have additional resources and FEMA didn't have additional resources. So the process of asking for money, of confirming all of the information and all the data behind the request has just gotten strung out to a large degree. We are fairly confident that we're going to see somewhere between $10 and $20 million come back to us in the next couple of months. We have the initial request for roughly $20 million that continues to be a real struggle with both the state and FEMA, and the struggle is just one of process. It's not one of a question whether the expenses are eligible or not eligible. And I guess the only other point that I would make in relation to what Ms. Kennedy said was that the mill rate that got passed last week did not in any way, shape, or form put the burden of our COVID response on the taxpayer. The tax increase that people are going to see was almost completely due to the governor's veto of school bond debt reimbursement. So we have not yet, and we are hopeful that we will never have to ask the taxpayer to pay these expenses, since we firmly believe that they are all FEMA eligible, and we meet daily to talk through the process necessary. But again, it's a long process that everybody in the country is trying to do at the exact same time, when the federal government and the state of Alaska have not added any structure to help improve the response. So we struggle as much with the delays, but we have to do this in order to continue to respond to the COVID emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Slivka, you were next in the queue. Did you have anything else to
add? No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. I'd just make a comment. Kind of prudent families, individuals, and businesses and so on have savings for emergencies, and this city has been very disciplined and kept a very substantial fund balance, based on our rules, that allows us to do this. So, no one wants to dig into it, but this is exactly what it's for. So, and we're lucky that the money's there. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if there'll be an answer tonight, but it'd be great if it could be dug out by the time we talk about the transition tomorrow at Health Policy. I see that in the memorandum that $312,000 per month is being used to operate the Lake Otis Community COVID testing site. And looking at the website on daily test totals by site, I don't see the Lake Otis site represented in the graphs. So I'm curious if that's been stood down and if that we have past expenses for that particular site. And then similarly, I would like to learn more by either tomorrow or in the coming weeks, what are the PPE demands still being placed on the municipality and what role we're specifically playing there, both in terms of our own internal needs for PPE, particularly for those workers who are having a lot of contact with the public, but also to the extent that we're distributing PPE within the community. I think this appropriation is appropriate, but I would like more details as we're moving into this transition phase about which parts might be ramping down and which parts we're going to be looking at carrying through, possibly through to this September timeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the administration like to respond to any of that tonight, or will you be saving that for tomorrow?
Through the chair, this is Instant Commander Bob Dole. Permission to speak?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, in the terms of the ramping down, there are ongoing, that is our emphasis too, disasters should not last forever. As we will discuss tomorrow, we are closing down 2 congregate facilities in the next 30 days. We don't plan on carrying this out to the end. Although the Lake Otis contract that was previously stood down for testing there, that has been actually rolled over to another contractor at the Elmore and Tudor parking lot. We still call it the Lake Otis neighborhood for ease of identification because it really was meant to suffice to do the same thing as that one. We have stood down the PPE role, and we will though look at the PPE we are still expending for the other missions that we are doing to support our folks that are out doing vaccinations and other things, and we'll get you more of a breakdown in the future on that. But these numbers do reflect a drawdown as we have reduced scope and are reducing scope in various activities.
Thank you, Mr. Dole.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote. And as a reminder, because this is an emergency ordinance, it does require 8 votes, I believe, for it to pass. That item is approved 8-2.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a quick point of information. To the member of the audience who spoke earlier, the question about, Irene, of what takes 3/4 of the membership to pass, this is the item specifically that the code states takes 3/4 of the members to vote yes as an emergency ordinance. And so we just passed one of those right now with an 8-2 vote. So I just wanted you to know that this is that kind of exact item that part of the code and charter speak to.
Thank you. Next, we have item 13A, ordinance number AO 2021-27, an ordinance adopting the 2040 Long-Range Transportation Plan as an element of the comprehensive plan and amending Anchorage Municipal Code, section 21.01.080. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. Mr. Weddleton?
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Weddleton?
Yeah, I would. The intents on this were really good. We had the MTP 2040, and we thought, well, we need to really get our own true long-range transportation plan, and kind of charging ahead with that. And then we were shown that there's actually, because this would become part of the comprehensive plan, there is in code a very rigorous procedure for that that would include going through the Planning Commission, the Urban Design Commission, and then back to the Assembly. So we've opted to do that proper process, and we funded it in our budget as well. So that's where we'll go. So we'll see something coming at us after it goes through those bodies in the next 4 or 5 months, something like that.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely? Okay. Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely. That item is approved 10-0. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a short break, and we will be right back. for that lengthy, unexpected break. Both the vice chair and I received some privileged legal advice from our municipal attorney and from our assembly counsel regarding the legality of a vote recently taken. So we're going to go ahead and move on to item 14A.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to change the order of the day and take up item 15O right now, as those individuals are sitting here and they'll be here until the end of the night, and I would like us to honor their presence by taking care of their business.
Second.
All right, that is our last item. So moved and seconded. So the motion is to change the order of the day to take up 15O right now, and then we'll go back in order. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, seeing none, then that motion has been approved. So we're going to go ahead and take up item 15O, resolution number AR 2021-157, a resolution approving an alcohol special land use permit for beverage dispensary use and license number 135 for El Dorado in the B3 district. John.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? And just for the record, we have no one on our phone list for any item. Okay, seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Constant.
Thank you. It's not necessary, but would you like to speak? All right, so no, thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. Seeing no discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Mr. Chair, I'd
Yes.
make a similar motion to change the order of the day, to take up 15L.
Second.
All right.
Same reasons.
Yes. So before we take up this motion, are there any other items that we want to change? Going once. Okay. So then the motion we have before us, it was moved and seconded, is to change the order of the day one more time to take up item 15L next, and then we'll go back and take up everything in order starting at 14A. Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, hearing none, then that motion is approved. So we now have before us item 15L, resolution number AR 2021-155, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly regarding the renewal of package store liquor license number 156 for KYJ Corporation DBA In-N-Out Liquor number 1.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Welcome. And Mr. Potter, I assume you're going to be speaking on behalf of the Community Council? Okay. Your mic is off. And now it's on. There we go. It's on, so you're good.
Good. Okay. I'm powered up now. Look out. My name is Tim Potter, with the Midtown Community Council, head of their subcommittee on marijuana and liquor licenses. And with me tonight is Eunice Kang.
Hello, I'm from In-N-Out Liquor. I'm just a representative here. So thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and just pause this really quick.
Yes.
So we typically do one person at a time. Is this going to
Yes.
be joint testimony, or is this going to be separate testimony?
Okay. I'm just going to give the Community Council's testimony.
Okay, so separate testimony. All right, I'll go ahead and continue your timing.
And I promise I won't take the 5 minutes. So we have been obviously working very hard in the Midtown Community Council dealing with a long list of packaged liquor licenses for the last few years. In most cases, we've been getting very good cooperation from the license holders, and we've entered into memorandums of understanding. There's only one that has not worked, and that is going through a long process of deliberation with the ABC board and the courts, but we'll survive that as well. The Community Council is very pleased that In-N-Out has been working with us diligently for the last 3-4 weeks to develop and agree to the issues that we brought up in the MOU. And with that in mind, it's our desire that the Assembly support the renewal of their current license, and that we will monitor it closely. Eunice and her mother, the actual owner, will be coming to our community council meetings on at least a quarterly basis, and we'll be trading thoughts back and forth about what issues she's dealing with and what issues that we will be dealing with. And I have no doubt, because of this very tight-knit, multi-generational family, it truly is a family business, and they will work diligently to uphold the conditions that they've agreed to, that we believe are kind of the underpinning line of what works in our area and the issues that we're faced with from a inebriate and homeless inebriate problem that has really taken a toll on Midtown. So with that, I'll just ask you on behalf of the Community Council to, subject to the MOU that we have with In-N-Out, we would prefer that you pass and approve their renewal for their liquor license. And as I've told Eunice, and I've told a few other people, that if I am surprised and they do not cooperate in the future and this falls apart, I will be one of the loudest, if not the loudest, voice coming to the Assembly, complaining and taking action with you and the ABC board to correct the situation. But it really is my belief that this is a trustworthy small group of people, and they've been delightful to work with, and understand that not just they, but the community has skin in this game as well, and their actions through the MOU are really targeting and directing our dealing with that problem and reducing the issues that really have taken a toll in the Midtown area. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you like to speak? Yeah. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Eunice Kay, and I'm a representative for In-N-Out Liquor. I just wanted to let you know we are actually totally new owners from previous. I just want you guys to know. So we are no longer associated with the previous owner from 2019. I just wanted you to know that we did this voluntarily because we see the problem and we see the people that come into our store, and we always try to not come in our store anymore, but sometimes it's out of our hands and they come in and they try to come in and purchase, but we try our best to not cause such problems. And I hope this memorandum will prevent more problems from happening in this community. And I hope you can trust us that we will do our best to follow these memorandum, especially regarding the 2 shooters per customer per day. We do have shifts. Usually it's 2 shifts, so just in case if someone happens to come earlier or comes later and there's a different person working, and if that happens, if another person buys a shooter earlier in the day and they come back and they know that it's someone else that's working and they try to buy shooters then sometimes we can't, it's out of our control. So, but we'll try our very best to prevent that from happening. But please understand that that may happen, but I don't know what else to do. I mean, I can't say like, oh, can you write your names here or go through all the security cameras or any of that. That's a lot of work. But we will try our best. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So we have Rivera Amendment number 1. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Chair Rivera, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I had a couple other amendments approved that I won't be bringing to the body tonight that sought to check boxes in the resolution and move forward with implementing conditions very similar to some other liquor licenses very near to In-N-Out. But very recently, I was given an MOU between In-N-Out and the Midtown Community Council, which is attached to this item. It was on the addendum AIM 76-2021. This AIM lays out a series of voluntary conditions In-N-Out has agreed to uphold. And as you heard from Mr. Potter, this has been a typical process the council has undergone recently with some success in the Midtown area. So because of that, I ask support of this amendment so we can strip this resolution of the conditions and instead rely on In-N-Out to be good neighbors. And it'll basically make this protest very similar to the other protests that we have before us, in which In-N-Out only has to get the certification from the land use enforcement, and then the conditional protest will be lifted. If, just like Mr. Potter stated, if In-N-Out proves that they can't be good neighbors, but I have full confidence that they can be, I'd expect this item to come back to us, and I'll push that these conditions get formally placed onto the license. But for now, I'd like us to move forward in good faith. Thank you. Mr. Weddleton on the amendment?
I'd like to amend the amendment, and this would be to also delete in section 3 on page 4, lines 11 and 12, delete the words "and request conditions to be placed on the renewal of liquor license number 156.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Weddleton?
That if we remove section 4, then that kind of lingers out there as puzzling. So it kind of ties with section 4, so it needs to be deleted.
Yeah, thank you for that addition. So for the clerk, so this amendment adds another section where for section 3, part C in the resolution, it removes the words "and requests conditions be placed on the renewal of liquor license number 156. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Is there any other discussion on this amendment to the amendment? Is there any opposition to adding this amendment to the amendment? Okay, hearing none, the amendment to the amendment is approved. We're now back on the amendment. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, members may proceed to vote on Rivera Amendment number 1. Okay, that amendment is approved 10-0. We're now on the main motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. Mr. Perez-Padilla? That item is approved 10-0. Thank you both so much and have a good night. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go back to item 14A, resolution number AR 2021-135, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $1,150,000 to the area-wide general capital improvements project Fund Maintenance and Operations Department from general obligation bond proceeds to pay the cost of facilities capital improvement projects. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Weddleton.
Well, we have very few spectators here in the chambers. Thank you for the diehards here, but all the many on TV. What we're doing for the next few is actually approving bonds that were voted on in April and passed. So just for people to...
Thanks for that note of clarification, Mr. Weddleton. 14A. Members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 14B, resolution number AR 2021-136, the resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $2,100,000 to the Maintenance and Operations Department for AWARN infrastructure upgrade, $1,470,000 to the Anchorage Fire Department for ambulance replacement and a heavy rescue vehicle, and $500,000 to the Traffic Engineering Department for school zone safety, all within the Anchorage area-wide General Capital Improvement Projects Fund, and appropriating $1,230,000 to the Public Transportation Department for bus stop improvements facility. Thank you. From general obligation bond proceeds. Public testimony on this item. Welcome.
Okay, we're live. My name is Rachel Holvard, speaking for myself. Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Weddleton, for pointing that out. I did have also another general question for these type of things. So before I started annoying you all here for the past year, there was a couple of years ago that I came to testify as a carpenter, as an apprentice, that we were going to do like some kind of a collective bargaining agreement where anything over, it went from like $2 million to $500,000. We were going to utilize companies that had apprentices. Is there anywhere in here where these things that are being bid, that we have any kind of an assurance that that is going to be union work or trending towards union work or anything like that? Like I said, it was a few years ago that I remember coming to testify, and it was passed that night. I'm not sure if it took the form of a resolution. I think it was an AR, but it was a couple of years ago.
Great.
If it was the form of like a PLA or anything like that.
Thanks. Did you have anything else? Okay, thanks. Mr. Weddleton, are you going to ask the administration for a response? Because that should be done during deliberation.
I guess we can wait, yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks. All right, so Mr. Weddleton will ask that question during deliberation. All right, is there any further discussion on, or excuse me, would anyone else like to testify on this item? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. So to the administration, I believe the speaker was referring to the community workforce agreement routine that we'd set up for projects over $3.5 million going to a committee. What is the status of the various bond projects and the CWA?
And through the chair, this is Lance Rober, the Director of Management and Budget. Mr. Weddleton, the agreement for any capital projects that we have going out the door, so we would start that process by reviewing the project to follow the rules of that potential agreement. So to answer the question of the member speaking, yes, if any project is available and it meets the dollar threshold, we would apply that community workforce agreement. So maybe Mr. Bockenstead might want to jump in, correct me if I didn't get all of it correct. Thank you.
Okay, sounds like you were correct, Mr. Wilbur. Mr. Weddleton?
Well, I think when it hits the threshold, it would go to a committee that would decide whether or not the project would be under the community workforce agreement. So it's not guaranteed that if it meets the threshold that it would be under CWA. Is that correct, Mr. Wilbur?
That is correct, Mr. Weddleton.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 14C, resolution number AR 2021-137, resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $3,950,000 to the Anchorage Bowl Parks and Recreation Service Area Capital Improvement Projects
Waive
Fund.
reading.
Thank you. This is also from general obligation bond proceeds. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 14D, resolution number AR 2021-138, resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $36,425,000 to the Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service Area Capital Improvement Projects Fund.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve.
Members, I'm going to take a roll call vote from three of you. We're having a little glitch in our system. So, Member Allard, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes 10-0.
Thank you.
Let me move to, could we take a 5-minute break? Because it's doing the thing where it's logging me all out. I don't know why. So if we could take a 5-minute break.
Sure. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break to deal with some technical issues. If we can go ahead and take our seats, please. We're about ready to get started. All right. So next we have next we have item 14E, resolution number AR 2021-139. Resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $500,000 to the Maintenance and Operations Department for AFD facility improvements and appropriating $1,450,000 to the Anchorage Fire Department to replace a fire ladder truck.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This is also from general obligation bond proceeds. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 14F, resolution number AR 2021-102, resolution approving administrative agreement AA number 2021-02 between the Municipality of Anchorage and the Anchorage Municipal Employees Association agreeing to a telecommuting agreement. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Welcome.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, decision made by the governing body is more likely to public interest. I was planning not to speak on any of the public hearings tonight, but this one popped up and it needs to call you some attention, particularly when it addresses COVID. Now, this is a I live in the Valley, but 20 of those years I lived in Anchorage, 43 years in Alaskan, and currently a Valley resident. For the sake of saying that, so that Assembly Member Allard knows where I live. So this agreement is calling an agreement dealing with telecommuting. The premise is dealing with COVID and working at home. And it's not surprising that you have an agreement here to say, okay, COVID is real, so we need to show respect and concern about the employees that work in the Municipality of Anchorage, in this case here. And this is how an agreement, we're going to deal with it and give them some distance. But it's ironic and saddened that at one end of the perspective tonight and the previous regular meeting, there seems to be a walking away that we're moving away from COVID. It's opened up and there's masks, we're opened up and we don't need it. But if we don't need it, then why do we have an agreement to have a distance for the employees in the Municipality of Anchorage? That doesn't make sense. So obviously, the message from this represents is COVID is real, and the employers need to have an agreement, and the union is saying, okay, we like this idea of working at home. Now, I'm not saying that this is a wrong approach, respectively, but you can't have it both ways. At one end, you're going to say, let's open up, and you have been inappropriately dealing with the way you handle masks and social distancing, and realize there's been division among the Assembly and administration to how to handle this situation. And the fact is, respectively, with 49 seconds to spare, I'm at a loss because I'm the principal one in this meeting, in this room, from time to time again, that says it's real. You need to deal with it. And you got this agreement, and all respect is, I'm really frustrated because you need to have these masks. You need to be concerned about the employees that work in the Municipality of Anchorage. You need to be concerned about the safety of everyone that visits Anchorage, but whether tourists or working here and so forth. But you cannot have certain entities of the city of Anchorage, and I'll take one last thing respectfully. You've taken issues with labor and given them increased pay. Now in this agreement, when businesses were going out of business and employees were wondering if they were going to have a job. This is not
Thank you for
being
your
fair
testimony.
to both parties.
Your time is
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out that this is a part of the transition plan that we instituted early on. We passed a resolution asking the administration to work with the various collective bargaining units to look at telecommuting policies, what would make sense, because we didn't want to have work arrangements flipped on or off like a light switch or tied just to an emergency declaration. So good work by this collective bargaining unit and the administration and others in finding ways forward and finding what works for them. And I don't find that doing this and our prior actions around the attachments to EO20 to be contradictory. In fact, I find this to be a careful and stepwise transition so that we can use all the available tools at our disposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Thanks. You know, I know how to actually extended it beyond COVID-19. I mean, the catalyst for this was COVID-19 and the work at home things, but you know, there's a lot of reasons where you might not be able to work in the office, but you would be very effective working at home. And I might be biased because I've always had an office at home and that's where I do all my work. But last year, my wife and daughter have been working home too, and they work an awful lot more working from home than they did when they go into the office. And I know there's a fear that people working at home maybe aren't efficient, and I'm certainly, that's the case too. But you know, the wording in here I really appreciate because it emphasizes it's not a right. You're going to do this if your supervisor finds that it's working. You have to come into work. I think at least once a week, but it's not 100% of your schedule hours at home. So you're going to keep a contact with your coworkers and supervisors. So I think it's actually presented very well to you know, prevent misuse, but allow the flexibility that can you know, really enhance productivity. And you know, I also, before I got on the Assembly, was on the board of Credit Union 1, and we have a lot of people who are working from out of state because they were really good workers, and then their husband got transferred or something, their spouse got transferred, and we kept them on by letting them work from home out of state, and it worked out very, very well. So this has been going on for a long time, and we were just kind of moving into a world that a lot of businesses have already been doing. Thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you know, it's becoming a new normal. Many companies around the country and the world found out during the pandemic that when they allowed their employees to work from home, that in some cases production went up and improved. And so if that's the case and they find that they want to continue with that, then that's good for their company and good for the economy. And so we, as the municipality of Anchorage, can't sit here with blinders on and say, oh no, let's go back to doing everything exactly the way we used to do it. This may be becoming the new normal, and so you know, we have to be agile and make adjustments. And so I think that's what this agreement does. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to echo the thanks from Ms. Zalatel to the administration. I appreciate the guidelines that they've put together here and that they can be utilized beyond COVID. I did just want to comment, you know, on the administrative agreement portion. It stresses how this is a benefit to the employee, meant to increase job satisfaction and work-life balance. I don't disagree that can be a benefit. It's definitely not for everyone, and appreciate that it is a decision that's made with the manager here. But this is also, and Mr. Peterson and Mr. Weddleton, I think, pointed this out, teleworking agreements can be a tremendous benefit to the employer and a way to be competitive and retain talented employees. And I don't think that piece is really expressed here, but in fact, it says that certain reasons like childcare are not the reason for teleworking, but that is one way in which to support families and people who are in caregiver roles as well by having that flexibility. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thanks. Ms. LaFrance just said a key word or phrase, work-life balance. And, I've been on a bit of a philosophical rant on this topic that the COVID pandemic has changed the way I look at that. It is no longer for me and the people in my sphere a work-life balance. It's a life-work balance. And I know our job is to ensure that the municipality's resources are used wisely, so we have to keep that in mind. But I think it's really valuable for us to put in perspective that our lives are what's important. The workers' lives are what's important. The municipality needs to support people to have a healthy balance in their life, and this is a tool to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 14G. Ordinance number AO 2021-43, an ordinance authorizing the non-competitive disposal of municipal real property to the Terraces Homeowners Association, legally described as Tract L, the Terraces Phase 2.
Wait for you.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 14H, ordinance number AO 2021-40, an ordinance amending the Anchorage 2040 land use plan to change the land use plan map designation of approximately 14.97 acres from park or natural area, light industrial, commercial, community facility or institution, and city center to city center and park or natural area. Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 14I, ordinance number AO 2021-41, an ordinance amending the zoning map and approving the rezoning of approximately 14.97 acres from PLI district to B2C district for block 36, lot 2, and block 35 East Addition, Anchorage Townsite subdivision.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Weddleton.
Just a comment, and just, I guess, for the viewing audience. What we did in the previous item is we changed the land use plan in a way that would allow us to do this rezone. And now we're doing a rezone. And I think briefly, and Mr. Constant can correct me if I'm wrong, but, this is so that we can kind of make the plan for the old Native Hospital happen. We've got a plan for that, but the current zoning won't allow that to happen. So change the land use plan so we can change the zoning, and we're just doing the rezoning now, ultimately to get to the place where that plan wants that property to be.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Constant.
I would like to take a moment of personal privilege, please.
Go ahead.
Miss Ward, you are a wise, wise person. The struggles of this piece of land are endemic, and they go back a long, long way. This was the site where Alaska Native people were forced into having all kinds of terrible medical procedures. Also where many people were born. So life and death, torture, generations of suffering. and then generations of malaise, where it was left to rot and to turn into a place of decay and waste and sadness and tragedy, and just the story needed a new beginning. And I didn't really believe you, Robin, when we started this process, but I believe you now. And so I extend great thanks to you for getting us to where we are today and the protection you have just provided to this piece of land. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. The next items on the agenda involve applications for a liquor or marijuana license and/or a special land use permit for alcohol or marijuana. The process to review these items is different than the Assembly's legislative role because these are administrative or quasi-judicial hearings and require the Assembly to be impartial, refrain from ex parte communications except in liquor license applications, and make a decision based only on the record before us and testimony today. Also, like I stated earlier in the meeting, we are about to start the normal annual season of liquor license renewals, which is why we have so many items in the 15 section of the agenda. Although we have a lot of conditional protests on our agenda, most of these should be very easy to get lifted. In fact, the following items will be lifted tomorrow because they very recently met all of the conditions of the protest, including 15C, 15H, 15K, 15M, and 15N. With that, we now have before us item 15A, resolution number AR 2021-141, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving the transfer of controlling interest of municipal marijuana retail license number M15019 to B2H LLC DBA The Tree House AK, stating the Assembly's waive a protest of the transfer of State of Alaska marijuana license number 15019.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there were members of the Northeast Community Council that were asking about this license and thinking it might have been a new license or an application for a new marijuana business. And actually all this is transfer of ownership. It used to be a partnership, and now one person is buying the other one out and going to 100% ownership. So this is not a new license. Just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15B, resolution number AR 2021-147, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of beverage dispensary duplicate liquor license number 932 for Hickle Investment Company, DBA The Quarter Deck.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15C, resolution number AR 2021-150, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of beverage dispensary tourism duplicate liquor license number 5210 for Alyeska Resort Operations Limited Partnership, DBA Sakura Asian Bistro.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15D, resolution number AR 2021-156, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place liquor license number 4158 for Bombay Deluxe Inc., DBA Bombay Deluxe Restaurant.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15A, resolution number AR 2021-144, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of beverage dispensary liquor license number 758 for DAWG Inc., DBA Birchwood Saloon.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15F, resolution number AR 2021-145, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of beverage dispensary liquor license number 3518 for Jalapenos Inc., DBA Jalapenos Mexican Restaurant.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. Mr. Presverdia? That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15G, resolution number AR 2021-146, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of beverage dispensary liquor license number 3538 for Jalapenos Inc., DBA Jalapenos Mexican Restaurant.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15H, resolution number AR 2021-148, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place at liquor license number 5039 for Barbie's LLC, DBA Barbie's Cafe.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved. Oh, I didn't see you there. Mr. Constant, can we put his vote in? Okay. All right, so for the record, Mr. Constant votes yes. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15I, resolution number AR 2021-149, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place at liquor license number 5790 for Arturo LLC, DBA Arturo Bistro.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote.
I think I'm locked out again, Mr. Chair. So I vote yes.
Thank you. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15J, resolution number AR 2021-153, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of package store liquor license number 4179 for Fred Meyer's Stores, Inc., DBA Fred Meyer number 11.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Ms. Salato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This particular license, while not in the Midtown Community Council area, is adjacent, and I noticed there isn't a specific memorandum of agreement with the Rogers Park Community Council, so I will be encouraging them to take a look at some of the Midtown Community Council MOUs for in the future to possibly institute with this particular institution, or at least have that conversation and work with them as part of the community, because a community council boundary isn't really the neighborhood boundary in that instance for Midtown and some of the issues it's seen. So I just wanted to raise that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve.
I vote yes.
Thank you.
Constant.
That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15K, resolution number AR 2021-154, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place liquor license number 5050 for Folina East, LLC DBA Folina East.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve.
I'm back in.
That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 15M, resolution number AR 2021-151, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of beverage dispensary tourism duplicate liquor license number 5211 for Alyeska Resort Operations Limited Partnership, DBA The Pond Cafe. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have 15N, resolution number AR 2021-152. Resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of package store liquor license number 5002 for TCCH Incorporated DBA Winehouse. John.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony is now closed. Public testimony is now open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the main motion to approve. That item is approved 10-0. That completes our regular agenda. As both the mayor stated in her mayor's report, and I stated to the body via email, there is one more item that is going to be laid on the table tonight, or at least we will have the opportunity to do so. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break for us to get copies of that laid on the table item. For the benefit of the body and the public, it is my intent to ask us to push that for a public hearing on Tuesday, May 18th, where we already have a special meeting scheduled. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break while we get this item printed and ready for the members. I think we're still waiting a few more minutes, but at the suggestion of a member, I'm going to go ahead and move on with final audience participation and possibly assembly comments, and then hopefully by then we will be ready for the item. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to final audience participation. Would anyone like to participate? Welcome.
What a day. You surprised me. I was planning to have a little break, you know.
The timer did go off, Mr. Haberman.
Well, wait a minute, just a second. I can set my clock and change it from 5 to 3. Okay. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman, 43 years Alaska resident, 20 of those years Anchorage resident, Kootenai Valley resident. What I'm going to talk to you tonight is one of the meetings I attended recently. It was at the City of Palmer. You may have seen some news clips about it in the news today. Respectfully, and warnings about it, but I was physically present. There was a presentation that was put on, as you know, a request to be heard, and it was put on the agenda, and a group called Matsu Moms for Social Justice had a planned presentation. That presentation did not occur, but what did occur was a complete different story, and an environment that was totally hostile for people to want to be there if their opinion was different from those present. And that's not the environment. I appreciate the chair respectfully when you bring people up, you say welcome. Thank you for those simple words, welcome. But the public was not welcome unless they followed the path of that way and not that way. And we all need to respect each other, both members of the public and elected officials and government officials. And we cannot have that kind of discourse that occurred in the City of Palmer, and it was frightening. That group never did a presentation. They canceled it. And when that cancellation was announced at the 7 o'clock portion of the meeting, because it was told as a 6 o'clock, but told the 7 o'clock portion of the meeting, the chair, representative, the chair in the meeting announced it, and there was a big applause. Applause that they were not going to do their presentation. What was the presentation going to be on? It was going to be on a police advisory board that Palmer did not have. In Anchorage, you have the Public Safety Committee. In Anchorage, you have the Assembly Committee dealing with, you're involved. There is conversation. I'm not saying it's perfect, but in our country today, Americans throughout the country are concerned about what's going on. It wasn't a simple thing about a chokehold. It was a reaction to people over the years having a problem with police standards sometime in their life, and that's why those marches happened. But in Palmer, they felt there in that room, it's all good. We don't need this. And they attacked that group, violently attacked and other elements of other groups. And we all in Alaska need to show that we welcome everyone of different opinions, and we need to hear each other. But I encourage you to listen to the tape of that meeting. It's available. It's horrible. And I'm exhausted, by the way, from being there. But as I tell people, I only report what I witness. I welcome people telling me things, but I report what I witness. And there's a chapter in our history that's not too good at all. Thank you very much, with 2 seconds to spare.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Welcome.
Rachel Colvard. I'm a little disappointed in the action that happened tonight. If this truly was an emergency still, we would have evidence of that. Now, I'm not saying that the people that have gotten sick or that have died, that's nothing. That's not true. But where we are today and where we were last year at this point are vastly different. And the reason that we don't vaccinate children is because they have a 0.0002% of death from this thing. They're very resilient to this, and that decreases as we go up, even though at the elder age ranges, it's still within a couple percent. This thing's very survivable. There's treatments for the long haulers. There's so many adverse reactions compared to what we were. The last time that we were here and I got to speak to you all, I was in the middle of telling you that in the last 20 years, the whole time that I've been in Alaska, there have been 5 adverse reactions that ended in death in Alaska. In the last 4 months, you've had 19 deaths, adverse reactions from the COVID vaccine. Not any other vaccine, just the COVID vaccine. There are treatments out there. There are protocols out there. And it's time to set the fear down. Get rid of the masks. If somebody wants to wear a mask, continue to wear a mask. But stop requiring us to play into your fear. If you're that afraid, there's the door. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to assembly comments. Go ahead and start on the side with Ms. Allard.
No comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was just going to quote some numbers from a recent poll. They were asking people why they hadn't been vaccinated yet. And believe it or not, it was 16.9%, just under 17%, said they did not know they were eligible to be vaccinated. And so I know it's hard to believe, but somehow we still have to keep working on getting the word out that everyone's eligible over the age of 12 now here. So if you think you're not eligible out there, yes you are. And sign up and please get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No comment tonight.
Thank you. I am next. I guess I just want to echo some of the comments made by both the mayor, Mr. Haberman, and I think some others about the need to ensure sort of civility and dialogue. And I think those words are particularly important because of some of the discussions that I believe we'll start having in June with the B3 zone change and the shelter licensing ordinance. And some of those might get pretty heated, but I hope we can maintain the modicum of civility and dialogue as we have those. So that is my hope that I'm putting out into the world. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks, no comments.
Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No comments this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
I just want to thank all of the workers who are down at the election center in that hub of intensity that is the center of our municipality's universe right now. I've had an opportunity to meet with a number of them just as I walked through. In particular, I think Lois is my favorite this year, and other than our staff, of course, who are always my favorite. But I just want to say thank you to everybody who's working hard down there to help in the transfer of the administration.
Thank you. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder that tomorrow is Bike to School Day across the municipality, so keep your eyes open for all those bicyclists and give them a friendly wave as they bike to school. Let's hope they have great weather. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be biking tomorrow morning, so I'm looking forward to that. And just want to give my thanks also to the folks working down in Ship Creek. Is that where it is now? Yep, still down there. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to finding out the result of this election. But I want to just echo my colleagues' comments about civility and regardless of which direction we go forward, we're going to be okay. And we're going to work through it, and we're going to continue to grow and become the city that we all know we can be. So thanks, everybody, for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, we're not done yet. So let me go ahead and explain this process, and then we'll go ahead and start with the motions. So as everyone just received, both physical copies and then in your email, 3 items, an unnumbered AR, which appropriates $51,658,683 from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 from the local fiscal recovery funds. I believe, and Mr. Bockenstead can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is, I think, all of the first tranche of money that we will receive this year. Then there's an Assembly Memorandum, which is also unnumbered, which goes with the resolution. There is also a spreadsheet, which I think details everything that is being allocated sort of program by program, which I think is helpful for the members to review at some point. So what we're going to do today is we are going to have a motion to lay this on the table. All right, so the clerk advises me, new procedure. So the clerk advises me that we can instead do just a singular motion to introduce this item and set it for a public hearing. And it's going to actually be for not the initial meeting that we have on already scheduled for May 18th from 6 to 9. We're actually going to do it right after as a separate meeting for the purposes of notice and keeping the agendas separate. The clerk and Assembly Council has advised that it's just easier for both us and the public if we go ahead and schedule a separate meeting, which will happen right after we are done with the business of the 6 o'clock special assembly meeting. So Mr. Weddleton will have the exact phrasing for that motion. And then, as I also stated via email, we're going to have a work session and a final town hall, potentially final town hall on Monday, the 17th, for us to go through this in more detail and for us to hear from the public before we consider this pretty large appropriation on Tuesday. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask actually Mr. Bockenstead to do a quick review of what we have before us, and then I will turn to the Vice Chair for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a few brief comments that might help as members kind of go through this AR, because it is, I believe, almost 8 or 9 pages and includes a lot of different sections. So the way that we crafted this AR is the first, I believe, 10 sections are all continuation programs from last year. So many members indicated that they wanted to see many of the grant programs that had a wait list to be included so that we could close out and every single individual that had applied would receive one. So the first kind of batch are those, the continuation programs. The next several in there are those items that we have talked about that would provide or allow for technical assistance, either internally when we talk about the I-team, or for the most part externally for those partners that have a particular expertise but maybe don't have the staffing right now to help other impacted businesses go after all of the available either grant programs or additional funding that is provided from the American Rescue Plan Act. The next are the next section, as you look, are kind of what we would consider the business and workforce pieces of the requests that we came in. So those are, helping specific industries maybe be more COVID conscious or providing additional training for their workforce. The next section that we included that we wanted to specifically call out where there were a number of requests that were in the Eagle River Chugiak area. So we wanted to specifically call those out as well. There's the next tranche are housing and homelessness related. And then we'll certainly go into more detail about this, but within the interim rule and the guidance, the Treasury Department actually provided a mathematical equation or formula that local governments are to use to calculate what their lost revenue is, and they tried to come up with something that ultimately would be consistent across all municipalities or all local governments across the country. So that is kind of the next section that you'll see, and I will just comment that the dollar amount you see in there is actually significantly less than what the formula actually spit out in terms of what our lost revenue would have been over the last several years. And we are fully recognizing that we're accepting less on that because we wanted to push out additional funds into these other programs. And then finally, the last section are those that are nonprofits. So again, you'll see only nonprofits in that last section. The final comment that I will make is we have spent a lot of time since Monday when the initial interim rule that is 151 pages, as well as the interim guidance from the Treasury Department, which is, I believe, close to 25 pages with a whole host of questions. And we believe every single one of the items on here correspond to a particular portion of the interim rule or are directly answered within the guidance. The one thing that I will say is there will likely be a couple of items when we're in the work session that we will want to provide a little bit more nuance for and potentially ask if it is a member that asked for this to actually provide a little bit more detail so that we can actually just double check that this is something that would be allowable. So with that, looking forward to the work session, and if there are any questions between now and then, certainly send them our way so that we can, I think, have a more productive either work session or town hall, whatever you're going to have on Monday evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm trying to call up on my phone right now. Have we received an email, an electronic copy of this yet? It looks like we just got one from Ms. Vanna Clausen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, great. Thank you for that overview, Mr. Buckenstead. And yeah, the work session on Monday, I don't think it's been noticed just yet, but it'll be from, I believe, 4:30 to 7. The first part being a work session, the latter part being a town hall, very similar to the other sort of hybrid meetings that we have held in the past. Okay, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the Vice Chair for the motion.
Move to introduce the AR number 2021 unnumbered and set for public hearing at a special meeting on May 18th following the already scheduled public meeting, special meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Quick question.
Yes, Mr. Constant.
Just procedural, and I texted the clerk to find out, but there's no need to lay it on the table?
Yeah, who wants to?
I just want to make sure.
Through the chair, the municipal code allows the assembly to set public hearings on resolutions at such time and with public notice as the assembly may determine.
Thank you.
So that's AMC 2.30.060. Remember that resolutions are, I believe we have another little section here that says But that's the section, and it allows you, what you're doing is the assembly can always introduce an ordinance, and it can always introduce a resolution and set it for public hearing. You need 1 to introduce, of course, and 3 to set for public hearing. But that is an exception to your laid on the table rule.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Sorry, we haven't done one of these in a while. So the clerk reminds me that this is just the first, second, and third. So so there was a mover. Was there a seconder?
Second.
And who is going to third?
Third.
Okay. So that item is set for a public hearing now at a special meeting on Tuesday, May 18th. With that, we are done with all of our business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.